Okay, so we've come to that special hallowed day, or the end of the Vasa, the Pavarana day, and this is a Longpo Cha tradition of all of the more junior members of the community giving Dhamma talks, and so the Ajahns get a little bit of a break from having to give a talk, and we can hear what some of the other community members have to say. And so I've got a bowl of names here. I'll be picking at random from the Anagarikas up to our new Ajahn Suhajjo, just a new Ajahn, completed 10 Vasas. And and just when I call each person's name, you're welcome to come up to the seat in the middle and first paying respects to Longpa, and then you can few reflections, 5-10 minutes, can be whatever feels comfortable, and we'll just or it can be shorter if that's what you're comfortable with. Also, whatever's coming up for you. Rakkhito. What's coming up for you?
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. This is kind of a Ajahn payback day, I think, a little bit, for all those teaching days they give. Well, let's see what's going on. This is my fifth Vasa now. Going into my Majjhima years now, no longer that new bhikkhu, somebody really important now, and it doesn't quite feel like that maybe, and I guess over this last period of time, I think the thing that happened for me that was maybe sticking out for me, kind of a personal accomplishment that turned out all right for me, was being able to chant the Patimokkha for the first time back in, I guess it would be back in August now. And it's something I had just started off as just kind of a dream, an aspiration, with a lot of uncertainty. More than probably 2.5 years ago, just eventually being able to do it. And it wasn't any kind of a standout, stellar performance, but it was fine by me. It wasn't too long. It didn't have too many mistakes, and it was a kind of a legal chant. So it felt good. It was a very satisfying feeling. It's something that I never would have dreamed that I would ever be able to do, even in my life. Being someone, kind of a lungta, I guess you'd say, someone who's ordained late in life, I never had to use, even in my school years, these kind of faculties of memorization, and I never really cared to. I wouldn't, it just never really, I would never dream of doing something like this back in my lay years. It just, I had too many other things I was interested in, but coming here and ordaining, and then going to Patimokkha's and just seeing the bhikkhus go through this chant that can take anywhere from a half hour to around an hour is, and sometimes it's even done flawlessly with. I think it's somewhere around 13,000 words, I think, to memorize, and I just found that just so impressive and inspiring that someone would want to pick this up and try it, and that people actually could do this, and for some strange reason I thought, well, maybe I should try I should try this, so I, after some time, I kind of pondered it, and then when I was over in Thailand, sitting in quarantine for COVID in Bangkok, just starting my year away, I got the bright idea, this would be a perfect time to start learning Patimokkha. And so I pulled out my little yellow book, and I figured out, I'll just start with the first four rules, and just see what happens. And after 2 weeks in quarantine, I think, I don't think I could even get the four rules straight after that time. And typically when someone is chanting, probably those first four rules would be chanted in less than, be like a minute or two at most. And but I'd like all day I'd be trying to memorize this, and it just seemed like I wasn't getting anywhere. I was quite discouraged. And it just seemed like such a impossible thing for me to ever master, not being much of a scholar or a academic, just kind of using these atrophied mental faculties, trying to get them to do something they never did in my youth when I was in school or anywhere in my middle years, and then now I'm trying to get them to do what I want, but something in me just kind of kept me, bringing me back to it, and I just was diligent and just kept pecking away at this thing, and then over time, just gradually learning more and more, but it really just seemed like almost like a impossible task. I would kind of meet other bhikkhus who had learned the Patimokkha, and there was one monk in Thailand. I asked him, how long did it take you? And he goes, I think it was around 3 months. I'm like, that's quite impressive. And he kind of seemed like he knew it forward and backwards, and here I was, I think I was just starting to get my Parajikas down. The first rules, it took me probably like 3 months just to get 3 or 4 rules down. And so I was under this constant feeling I was putting on myself of doubt, and I'm just not good enough, not smart enough, don't have the faculties to do this kind of thing. It just seemed like if you were to compare, getting into comparing, like what other people had and what I had, it would be like if your mind was like a dump truck that you could just pour in all this information and just back it up to your mental faculties and dump it in, and that would be maybe the gifted person, whereas I was more like the person, a person who had like a 1968 Volkswagen Bug, and I was trying to fill up little buckets of information and just driving back and forth and pouring it into a leaky receptacle, and almost as fast as I'm putting information in, it seems like it's falling out. But I just persevere. That's I think the one thing I had going for me was just perseverance. And but over time, though, what I started to find was I started to actually notice like how my mind learned things. That was the things that typically people would learn all the way back in elementary school or something, But I was too busy looking out the window, maybe, or something. But eventually just learning how my mind works and the best ways to approach this memorization project I took on, and eventually it started getting a little bit easier. And at one point, I think I was out at Daldom at that point. I had a lot of time on my hands to practice, and I made it to the point of there's a particular rule. It's Nasagya Pachitya 10, which is, I think, the longest rule. And somehow or another, I memorized it, and it, kind of felt like, when I started, there's like no way I'm going to be able to remember this. It's like trying to swim across the ocean. But it happened. I was able to do it, and then at that point, it started feeling like, well, maybe I can do this. Maybe it's possible. And things began to get easier, and just over, it seemed like the second half of the Patimokkha became easier for me to learn, and my brain started getting more accustomed to this kind of work and exercising it, and it became a little bit more proficient. And I had a lot of help along the way. Coaching, Ajahn Krinadamo helped me so much, and others along the way, and and this is something really, for most people, I think anybody who's been university or whatnot, who's had any kind of formal training in academics, it's not really that big of a deal, but for someone like me, it really was kind of a big deal, and in the end, I was able to do it. Whether I'll be able to do it again, I don't know, but I hope so. I keep trying to hang on to it, but there's just so much that I learned that I didn't realize I was going to learn, besides just memorizing these 227 rules and 7 sections within introductions and closings, and just kind of a that kind of maybe even more important things I just learned about myself, and just about my own heart, and just learning to be patient with myself, learning to just kind of trust in myself more, and just learning to coach myself more, and gaining confidence. And so through something like this, for me, it kind of just spreads out into other areas where something maybe seems like very unlikely that I could do or master or take on, and suddenly it becomes like, well, maybe it is, maybe I can. Maybe I can do these things. And, quite a bit of the monastic training for me has been like that, just, finding out that you can, you can sit up for vigils and not die from lack of sleep, and you can eat just one meal a day and not starve to death, and you can actually get fat even eating one meal a day. So, there's been a whole lot in this monastic life that over my short time being here that I didn't expect coming in, that have been things that have been very beneficial for me, and as an old guy too, it's almost like just a second chance to live a life differently after living such a varied life of the good, the bad, and the beautiful and ugly of my life, as a layperson to come here and still have enough gas in the tank and in health to do something, to do this kind of a life, and it's just a lot of good, wholesome surprises. And and it gets me thinking about Lampa, and I think about all the, I'm going to be 63 coming up this next winter here, and I think about all the twists and turns of my lay life, and all the different things I was doing since I was an adult back in 1979, and going out on my own, and all the good things and crazy things I've done, and then I think of Lampa ordaining when he did, back in the mid-70s, and I think about like some crazy time in my life, very unskillful time, and then I think about what Lampa was doing. Oh, Lampa was a monk. He was. I think about something else I did, and like through the 80s, oh, Lampa was a monk. Through the 90s, oh, Lampa, he was a monk. Through the passing of the millennia, yeah, Lampa was a monk. And all the different incarnations of a life that I've had, and then just the consistency that he had through his life is just mind-blowing, that someone can have that level of commitment, and it's like 50 years now. It's just amazing that he's been a monk longer than a lot of people in this room have even been alive, and through it's just such a marvel. It's such a precious thing, and just have so much appreciation in this whole opportunity for me being here is wouldn't have happened without him, and a lot of gratitude to Lampan and Tanjan Amaro and the others for making all this possible, having this opportunity here in the West for us to come and train, and I think that's all I really got for this evening. Thanks.
And the next speaker will be Tan Jotimanto.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ namasami. So a topic that's been on my mind lately has been the theme of metta, which is this quality of unlimited, unconditional goodwill for all beings. And it's a very important part of our practice. It manifests in many dimensions of the Buddha's teachings. What's been standing out for me as I've contemplated it is just how often it's given parallel treatment to the jhanas throughout the Pali Canon. And that's certainly one of the 11 benefits of loving kindness or goodwill that the Buddha mentions, is that one who really develops this theme, consolidates it, makes much of it, really undertakes it sincerely and thoroughly, one attains concentration easily. And throughout the Metta Sutta, we can see this theme manifesting to some degree. The sutta discusses being free from sense desire, being free from hatred and ill will, being free from drowsiness, discusses being peaceful and calm, having clarity of vision. And so essentially one of the things that this sutta is doing is it's mapping the application of this theme to the 5 hindrances, which are the qualities of mind that are said to weaken discernment and keep one out of this state of samadhi, which is tantamount to what's called the Brahma-like mind. And so when we cultivate this state of metta, what we're doing is we're cultivating an exalted state of mind that's tantamount to something very divine and blissful, which is why it's called a Brahma Vihara, or a dwelling of the gods. And so I would just like to offer some reflections on how this theme of metta can apply to the 5 hindrances and be used as a multi-tool of sorts. In regards to this topic of cultivating the Brahma-like mind, a sutta that stands out for me is one called the Aganya Sutta, which is a mythologized account of the Buddhist cosmology in terms of how when the universe when it has dissolved and it's just coming into a state of regeneration, beings for the most part dwell in these Brahma realms, and they subsist in a very kind of pure and unadulterated state. But one thing that happens is that they start to develop sensual desire, which is the first of the 5 hindrances. And in one of the most striking parts of the sutta, as the Brahmas are gradually descending into more human forms and sort of losing their purity as they give themselves over more and more to sensual desire, one thing that happens in their devolution is they split off into separate genders. And when this happens, some of them begin having intercourse with each other. And the Brahma beings who are still relatively pure, they see this happening and they think to themselves, how can one being do that to another? And I think this is a really telling part of the sutta in that this is not the mind of a human being that we're trying to cultivate. We're trying to cultivate the mind of a truly exalted state of being. It's this goodwill that we're developing. It's not preoccupied with any kind of objectification or exploitation or degradation of other beings in a way that would selfishly try to regard others as being an object for our own gratification, but it selflessly considers the importance of other beings' desire for an independent happiness, and it's willing to make that into a priority. And it's not simply the case that this aspect of sensuality is all that's addressed by goodwill, but in general, in the realm of sensuality, we're usually dealing, for example, with the problem of scarcity of resources. And so when we begin to consider the welfare of other beings, we naturally incline towards renunciation as we realize that by taking less for ourselves, we naturally give more to others. And so we cultivate this quality of being unburdensome by learning to renounce sensuality in finer and finer levels. And as we do this, there's a natural joy that begins to manifest in the heart as we consider the well-being and happiness of others, as we learn to renounce sensual pleasures and learn to give more. And this joy acts as something that I think of as like a clean burning fuel source. Sensuality has a certain kind of brightness and rapture to it. It's what the Buddha calls the rapture of the flesh. But if you compare it to something like a fire, it's sort of like a fire that subsists on crude coal or something like that. It has a warmth and a light to it, but it also produces a lot of smog that blinds and suffocates one. Whereas the joy that comes up when we cultivate this quality of considering other people's well-being, it's sort of like a clean burning energy source that's stable and potent and something that we can really rely on, and it helps to wean us off of sensuality. The second hindrance is ill will, and I think one helpful way of contemplating ill will is the desire to control other beings' happiness. And this is usually motivated by some subterranean logic and concomitant indignation that wants to mete out happiness to other beings according to our arbitrary criteria. But it's worth considering that metta, or goodwill, principally is an intention. It's intent based on non-ill will, intent based on harmlessness. This is a large part of how the Buddha defines right intention. And it's important to note that right intention is underlied by right view. So in order to give rise to this intent based on non-ill will and this intent based on harmlessness, this quality of goodwill, we have to clarify our views around it and ask, what does it really mean to wish another being happiness? And what part of the function of right view is that it considers this law of karma, that all beings are the owners of their actions, heir to their actions, born of their actions, related to their actions, abide supported by their actions. And so what that means is that beings gain true happiness by acting on the causes of goodness and nobility. And so when we wish other beings happiness, this is ultimately what we're doing, is we're wishing for them to give up the causes of suffering, which are greed, hatred, and delusion, and to cultivate the qualities of goodness and nobility, and to ultimately live up to their fullest potentials as a human being, which is a wish that we can have for anyone. And when we think in these terms, it helps to uproot some of the subterranean logic and indignation that would seem to justify withholding happiness and well-being from others. And so this aspect of right view is paramount to the development of goodwill and the removal of ill will. The third hindrance is an interesting one. The Pali is tina mida, which the Buddha says can meaningfully be separated into two terms. Generally, what the third hindrance refers to is a deficit of energy, but the Buddha says that there is tina and there is mita. And generally, the first, tina, connotes a sense of deficit of energy in the mind. Whereas the second term, mita, I think the literal Pali is something like a pillar. And in this case, the pillar connotes something that is firmly entrenched in the ground and therefore stuck in place. It has insufficient movement or activity, and it's also a very physical image. So it connotes insufficient energy in the body. And so some translations are things like sloth and torpor, lethargy and drowsiness, dullness and drowsiness. Personally, I like lethargy for Tina, and I like drowsiness for Mita. As far as the deficit of energy in the mind is concerned, what I think of as lethargy, it pays to consider the fact that every action we undertake on some level is done with the intent to obtain happiness. And so if that's the case, then we want to make sure that we're undertaking that enterprise well, that we're doing it skillfully, and that we're doing it effectively, and that we're really giving our heart to it. So it doesn't really pay to be lethargic to our own happiness, but to really strive to put in as many causes of goodness and nobility as we can into our practice. And it doesn't pay to be lethargic to other people's well-being either, because personally I'd like to live in a world where people do reach their fullest potentials, where they do have beautiful conduct and they are wise and intelligent and virtuous and inspiring, generous and kind and selfless. And if there's any way that we can support other beings in that endeavor, then that helps not only them, but it helps us, because it helps to manifest a beautiful world for ourselves. So it's helpful to think in these ways, or whatever ways help to undermine this sense of lethargy towards practice. And as we begin to think in these ways, we can start to engage the discursive quality of mind and put this meditation theme into practice by calling up inspiring images or phrases that would evoke this quality of well-wishing, goodwill, loving kindness. And this discursive quality of mind has a natural energizing effect. In general, the Buddha said that there are 7 awakening factors: mindfulness, investigation of qualities, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. Numbers 2 through 4 of these, investigation of qualities, energy, and rapture, these are said to be the energizing qualities. So when the third hindrance is active, these are what we want to cultivate. And when we call to mind these phrases and images, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, or whatever works for you, there's lots of room for experimentation and even artistry, I would dare to say. This engages the second awakening factor on some level, which can be thought of as the wisdom or the discursive or the contemplative or even the critical faculty of mind in regards to the awakening factors. This naturally produces a degree of energy and effort that has as its result rapture or joy. And this energizes the mind. And as the mind becomes energized, it typically tends to wake up the body as well and remove this hindrance of mita or drowsiness. But we want our energy to be in balance. We don't want to have too much energy, because that's the fourth hindrance, which is translated, or the Pali of which is udacha kukacha. And like the third hindrance, this can be meaningfully separated into 2 terms, udacha and kukacha. Udacha connotes the excess of energy in the body, and so it's oftentimes translated as restlessness. Whereas kukacha, the Pali of which literally means something like bad doneness, and so, or wrongdoing, and so it's translated often as something like remorse. It can also be rendered as anxiety. It can refer to things like guilt, unwise fear, unwise agitation, and it generally has a sense of self-flagellation to it. And it's important to note that this tendency to criticize ourselves and to kind of loop regrets in our mind over and over again about bad things we've done, ways we could have been more skillful, this is a hindrance, and it's not to be cultivated. It weakens you, it obstructs your clarity, and it's not to be indulged or made much of. And so when we can use a variant of this theme of metta called compassion or karuna to really sympathize with ourselves and to some extent let us off the hook for mistakes that we've made. Not that we want to condone bad behavior, but at the same time we realize that on some level we're trying our best to find a happiness that is really reliable and noble. And it's only natural that there are going to be mistakes along the way. And we try to remedy those mistakes as best we can. And so when we can learn to have a bit of gentle levity in regards to ourselves, we can put the mind at ease and stop torturing ourselves with these restless kinds of regrets. And as we put the mind at ease in this way, the body tends to follow suit, and things tend to become calm. And this is where we begin to shade into the fifth awakening factor, which is pasada. And that's usually translated as tranquility. And this can refer to either tranquility of mind or tranquility of body, but for the most part, throughout the canon, the Buddha describes this in the context of tranquility of body. And he goes on to say that when the body is tranquil, the mind is easily concentrated. And so this begins to shade into the awakening factors of concentration and equanimity, factors 6 and 7. And these last three qualities, tranquility, concentration, equanimity, the Buddha says that these are the calming factors of these awakening factors. And so we want to bring our energy into balance by using this theme of boundless goodwill to think in these ways and to provide some stability and restfulness and ease in the body. And this inclines the mind towards concentration. But we need to also give up this hindrance of doubt. And the way that doubt is defined in the terms of the hindrances is it's doubt about what's skillful and unskillful. And so we tend to get flashes of this sense of boundless goodwill as we work with it. And once we get our foot in the door, so to speak, doubts about what's skillful and unskillful tend to melt away. This is actually one thing that the Buddha tells the Kalamas in the Kalama Sutta when they're having doubts about the various teachings they're receiving from all the spiritual gurus of India, and they don't know whose doctrine to believe. And the Buddha says at one point that when you've cultivated this quality of goodwill, you'll know for yourself that this is skillful, and you won't need anyone to confirm it for you. And so we want to learn how to trust that feeling and really give ourselves to it. It's interesting to note that in the 11 benefits of loving kindness, one of the items that I find most interesting in that list is that for one who really undertakes this practice thoroughly, one dies unconfused. One dies unconfused. And for me, that stands out as being quite a potent reflection. And I think that the reason that is because there's a radical simplicity to this quality of boundless goodwill, unconditional goodwill, precisely because it doesn't place conditions and stipulations on who will be happy and who will not. We're wishing for a happiness that everyone can have and that is boundless. And that's a very simple sort of wish. The moment we start saying, may you be happy if, that adds a complication. And complications are confusing. So we simplify this line of thinking by saying simply, may you be happy. And as we begin to simplify the mind in this way, simplify the emotional structure in this way, our doubts are removed. And we can more fully incline towards this quality of well-wishing, loving kindness, goodwill. And this is how we cultivate the Brahma-like mind, through the removal of these 5 hindrances. And it's not simply the case that this is only used for developing concentration, but it's also a tool for insight. I'll close by mentioning a sutta that I find very interesting. It's in the Book of the Elevens, and the 11-fold scheme refers to the 4 jhanas, the 4 Brahmaviharas, and the first 3 formless states. And the structure of the sutta is very simple. It's a stock phrase that applies to each of these 11 items, more or less. And basically what the sutta is saying is that for any of these states of mind, when you're cultivating them as a state of concentration, you can actually contemplate the conditions that are supporting that state of mind, and you can learn to let go of the volitional structures that are propping it up. And this insight can be enough to break through even to arahantship. So right there, you have the Buddha saying that this theme of metta can be enough to break through to full enlightenment, to say nothing of the lesser states. And so I think this is a quality that's really worth investing in. It's usually thought of as being an antidote to ill will, and it is, but I think it's helpful to view it as something of a multi-tool, something like a Swiss Army knife or a Leatherman that can have many purposes and applications, depending on how we use it. Just like with a hammer, if you use it one way, you can hammer a nail down, but if you turn it around, you can pry a nail up. And so I just want to give everyone encouragement to really explore this theme of contemplation and try to utilize and consider all of its different potentials and manifest those potentials by acts of body, speech, and mind. So leave that for reflection.
Ajahn Suhajjo be the next talk.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Maybe just to share some thoughts, both kind of have been spinning around since Ajahn Kunandamo's talk last night. And also Jotimanto touched on some very similar themes. This kind of, some sense, unity of, say, like the wisdom practices and the Brahma Viharas. And it's something that's very close to my heart as well, because I've kind of, I'm a very intellectual type, very heady person, but the Brahma Viharas are it's a very heart quality. So yeah, seeing the two are, they can be made to work together has been an important part of my practice. And one thing that struck me about something from Ajahn Kunadhammo's talk was I was thinking about how, for lack of a better word, how incredibly personal wisdom, panya, discernment, is in its true form. There's kind of a bit of a turn of phrase, or a kind of a almost like a pun I've heard some Thai ajahns use when somebody's overthinking something, or if they have an intellectual understanding, and they'll say something like, "Oh, that's sanya, that's not panya." And so it's something like that's just kind of, it's just memory, or it's just something, kind of something you've learned or memorized, but it hasn't become panya yet. And so it's easy to read lots of different teachings, or see how different teachings connect together in very beautiful ways, and that's a very important part of the practice. But if we don't make it very immediate and very personal, personal not in the sense of like, woe is me, or objectifying ourselves or other people, but just in terms of being able to relate the teachings to our own direct experience. I think that's a crucial aspect of this panya, this discernment. It's the ability to make decisions in our life for the wholesome, for long-term sustainable happiness, and that does involve a bit of understanding, a little bit of academic, understanding the terms or the structures of Dhamma, but it really involves having a clear awareness of how our own mind works in terms of those teachings. So this Dhammavicaya factor of the 7 factors of awakening. Another example of a similar quality is the 4th Satipatthana, this contemplation of Dhammas. And there's kind of a question, well, what's the Buddha meaning when he says contemplation or investigation of Dhammas? Dhamma is just an incredibly vast concept or a word, or it has so many different meanings. And is it the teachings themselves, or is it these phenomena that arise in our experience? And in fact, when the Buddha explains these factors of Dhammavicaya or Dhammanupassana, he explains it in both ways. He says, it's knowing and contemplating the teachings, but it's also knowing and contemplating these patterns of mind, or these qualities of mind that arise and cease in our experience. Which one is it? It's both. It's simply being able to look at our experience in terms of the Dhamma teachings. But that takes, for myself, it's taken a lot more effort focused in on this very intimate or very direct kind of dimension of panya. For me, it's been relatively easy to come up with conceptual maps, or to get definitions of words and nail down concepts, but then to get the actual feeling, the feeling tone for those things, what karuna actually feels like, what metta actually feels like, what sukha actually feels like, what dukkha actually feels like. And then the terms that I read in the suttas or in the maps of the teachings, they take on a very, very, very personal dimension. Personal in the sense, again, of something that's immediate, that I can feel. I can feel it in my gut. I can feel it in my body. And being able to sort of draw the connections between these terms and the patterns that we read in the suttas, when this leads to this, leads to this. And you can look back on your own life and your own mind and your own choices and see those dynamics, those cause and effect, seeing that at work and being able to steer the process. And for me, that's been a crucial kind of development. That's been the difficult but fruitful way of cultivating. I'll just leave that for reflection this evening.
Thank you. Next will be Samanera Hemako.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I just finished a 2-week retreat, and I wasn't looking forward to it ending, but it's actually really nice to see everybody. And I was thinking I would focus on things that we all have in common. Just kind of, it's been different things that have been bouncing around in my head. And I thought I'd relate some of those because they feel quite positive and also true, nice to reflect on. And, the first one that's coming to mind is I heard a Dhamma talk by Thai Ajahn, and it opened with, I think it was like, greetings or good evening, brothers and sisters in old age, sickness, and death. And when I first heard it, I thought it was like almost kind of like a dark humor. But as I've thought about it more, it was revealing to me that when I think about death a bit more frequently and kind of give time to death contemplation, it's actually a really like an intimate connection to everybody. And just that we have these bodies, and they started breathing one day, and how they're going to stop breathing, and there's nothing that anybody has to do. They'll just stop breathing all by themselves. And my grandmother used to say we're all just passing through. That's another thing we have in common. We're all at Abhayagiri, and we're all passing through Abhayagiri. And the community here, everybody's dedicated to telling the truth, which is something that I think is incredibly rare, especially in American culture, where there's whole movies where the main character's in a kerfuffle because they got themselves, and they're lying about something, and they're kind of this relatable person, and it just seems like a normal thing. But to be surrounded by people who are really trying to tell the truth, I think is actually really amazing. We all enjoy loving kindness. Jotimanto's reflections were quite nice. I was walking on the path today, and it occurred to me that pretty much, I think every time I find some behavior in somebody else irritating, they also find something in me irritating. And how we all have this experience of wanting to feel loving kindness and be warm, but we also have an experience of feeling irritation. And how we also share that with pretty much everybody. But when things get pretty calm and clear, there isn't the irritation there anymore. It's whatever that thing was, pretty much is like a crinkled leaf or something that just blows away, and it's super light and insignificant. That's another thing my grandmother used to do, was if somebody was complaining about something, she would point out death to them, and then have the comparison of basically not letting things that are small basically hold you down. Yeah, I haven't been speaking very much for a couple of weeks. There's a lot more people here than there are in my kuti. I think I'll close by sharing a thought experiment that I do from time to time that's I found really useful. Is sometimes even sitting in meditation, there will be kind of like a flashback to a previous chapter in my life and a previous place and previous people that aren't around me anymore. Or I remember when I was sitting once, I was walking up the stairs of an old apartment building in Boston that was 100 years old, and I could see the railings and the thick paint on them, and feel the carpeted stairs creaking under my feet, and then going into this old apartment. And being with people who are now in different phases of their life, and I was thinking how it was basically be like some kind of miracle to be able to go back and actually be there and kind of just spend a day in a part of our lives that's now impossible to return to, and how vivid that experience would be, and how much we would appreciate the people that would be around us, and maybe being in a younger body, or culture would be different before some sort of event that changed things irreversibly, and how we would really relish and be in the present moment if we were to go back to that. And connecting it with death contemplation, sometimes I'll think about, being, as some ajahns have had guided meditations of being old, being on a deathbed, and looking back. And the thought experiment is to basically imagine that you're in the future, and the time that you're looking back on is this situation, this chapter in our lives that we can't stay in. Being at Abhayagiri at this age with the people that are around us, all the people in this room, to continue the death contemplation, like one of us will be the last one alive, and chances are it won't be you or me. And by that time, we'll likely all have scattered around, But the thought experiment is to see this situation with the clarity of hindsight, and just valuing this situation with that same sort of gut understanding of the circumstances and how important they are, and the simple things and the people around us, and the abilities that we have to walk and speak, and we have food. We're not at war. And the nice thing about that thought experiment is to be able to go back into that time and have that clarity it's basically against the laws of nature, it'd be a miracle. But if you imagine yourself in the future, being back at Abhayagiri 2023, Pavarana Day, then boom, wish granted, and you're here. And you can kind of, I find it useful to cut through thinking too much about the future or the past and kind of relish the cork floor, or that I can sit on a cushion and be all right. I leave that for reflection.
Anagarika Max.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So I'm very happy to be here tonight, listening to wonderful reflections, surrounded by friends, new and old. Yeah, and I'm inspired by people deciding to spend their Sunday night endeavoring to do something beneficial for themselves and others. And I've been reflecting a lot on how I create suffering for myself, which is actually a radical idea in regular society, that it's not some other person outside making me suffer. No, I'm creating the suffering for myself. So I've been playing around with taking ownership over that and seeing how I do that, and then how I can potentially stop doing that, which is another radical idea. Maybe I can stop making suffering for myself. Maybe I can produce well-being for myself. And I was writing down these reflections, and I got up to about 52 ways I create suffering for myself. And I decided to take a break there. Let's stick with that. And there's this retreat that I really like from Ajahn Sono that I've listened to again and again and again. It's on right effort. And one of the talks in this retreat, he talks about appropriate attention. And appropriate attention plays into how I create suffering for myself, or how I don't create suffering for myself, how we as humans engage in this process. And appropriate attention is about viewing things or interpreting things in such a way as to create wholesome mind states or prevent unwholesome, unhelpful mind states. So the way we talk to ourselves will determine whether the events we experience create stress and suffering or inner well-being. So to illustrate this idea of appropriate attention, there's this anecdote I have. When I was at a different monastery a while back, I got obsessed with peanut butter. And there was a very small amount of peanut butter being, well, by my standard, very small amount of peanut butter being put out. And there was a lot of solitude when I was at this monastery, and my mind just really got centered on this peanut butter issue, and it drove me nuts. And one of the ways I realized I create suffering for myself is by getting really, really angry and agitated about little things that aren't really that meaningful or important. So some things I might have been saying to myself at the time were, this is ridiculous. This is not thoughtful or considerate. By the time the peanut butter gets to me, I'm barely getting any. Like, what's the deal here? This is not fair or right or whatever. And that doesn't feel good internally. So this is a unpleasant feeling I'm creating for myself, this aversion. And what helped me get out of that was to think of the absurdity of it. So then I started thinking, yeah, well, if I had this peanut butter, I'd finally be happy. I'd never suffer again. Like, everything would be okay if I had this peanut butter. That would be it. There would be nothing else to do. I'd be fine, right? Of course, the more I thought about that, made me realize, well, obviously not. So the peanut butter is a lie. The promise of the peanut butter that I'll be okay or be happy when I get this thing that's external. There's nothing there. Like, I can enjoy it if I have it. I could appreciate it, but to think that my happiness will come from that's not really true. So that would be appropriate attention, which could lead to greater well-being, equanimity. Okay, well, this is something I don't really have control over, but it's okay. I don't need this. Which would bring me back to investigating how I could find well-being and happiness internally by cultivating a sense of calm and focus in my own mind and body, and then investigating the processes in my own mind to see how I create suffering for myself and how I could potentially stop doing that thing, which is go to the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism. As far as I understand it, there's suffering, this suffering that we experience as humans. And the cause of this suffering, we crave things, we hate things, but there's also the third noble truth, this freedom from the suffering. Just figuring out strategic, wise ways of untangling, which factors into appropriate attention, looking at things in a wiser way. And then the Buddha's Eightfold Path, the Fourth Noble Truth, the step-by-step process of how to get out of that cycle. So, again, just want to express my gratitude to everyone here, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, who's going to be next? Anagarika R.J.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'm coming up on the end of my Anagarika year. It's been 11 months. When I first decided to go into Weiss, I had the thought that, willing to do anything except be kitchen manager. And so I had this aversion around that for some reason, and Ajahn Chunda came up to me one day and said, how do you feel about being kitchen manager? My first thought was, I think I've made a big mistake. But then I understood that I had this aversion, and so I said, okay, I'll do it, because that's what I came here for, to sort of challenge myself. And So, I was sort of at a mental crossroads. Like, either I can be miserable for the next 8 to 9 months, having to do something I don't really want to do, or I can, do it to the best of my ability, and so I chose not to be miserable, and sometimes I hear people refer to the kitchen as Abhayagiri hell realm, and when I hear this, I think, well, that's not the only one. There's also the pantry. There's the dining hall, my kuti, the bathroom, the Prius. But actually, that's not right. There is no Abhayagiri hell realm. It's just the untrained mind. It's greed, hatred, delusion, aversion, clinging, and so you do this every day. You get a good look at all of those things, and like Max was saying, you're really kind of just creating your own suffering. All of these places right now are completely still and quiet, so it can't be the kitchen or my kuti. It's just me. And I don't know if if it's just this tradition or this lineage, but it seems like living like the monastic life is sort of designed to force you to confront all of these things, basically at every turn, because like out in the world, when these things come up, you can just we have a million ways to distract ourselves and not actually have to do any work. So when we're here, we don't have all of these distractions. So we really don't have any choice usually. And so we're just here doing these things every single day, and I'm just very grateful that a place like this even exists, to have the kind of space to do this and sort of practice in this way. And so, when things are tough and you spill the juice all over the kitchen at the last minute, or the table collapses and you lose all the food, or whatever it is, it is good to just remember that this is why we're here, to try to work with these things and figure out, what can we do to not create as much suffering as we do for ourselves. So I'll just leave it there.
Tan Cittapalo.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I'm also just coming off a retreat, 2 weeks. 2-week retreat that all of the residents here get during the Vasa time. I thought I'd share maybe 1 or 2 reflections. And one of them just kind of germinated earlier today while I was standing over by the nuns' restroom or bathroom, kind of waiting during the meal anumodana while that was happening over here. Just waiting outside there with my bowl, kind of standing near with Samanera Hemako. And just kind of looking off to the side, and I noticed there was a woodpecker that was kind of on the ground and poking around, kind of tossing leaves to the side, and kind of caught my eye because it's not so common to see woodpeckers on the ground. They're always flying around doing various things. And then I saw that he picked up an acorn, so I thought, oh yeah, of course, it's an acorn woodpecker. He's looking for acorns. And then I followed him through the air as he took off, and he landed on this, on top of the buildings, there's this kind of strange-looking structure. It's basically a giant, looks like a giant birdhouse. There's, it's kind of rectangular. It has multiple kind of entry points, holes in it. One of them is just a curved PVC pipe. But it's kind of strange looking, and if you kind of if you've noticed it, it kind of blends in somewhat. But you can notice it from certain angles. And so what the woodpecker did was just flew up to one of these holes and just dropped his acorn down right in there. And my first thought was, oh, cool, that thing's actually working. And it was something that Ajahn Kaspo had built a number of years ago now to help with the woodpecker problem, because what the acorn woodpeckers love to do is they find an acorn, which we have tons of, especially this time of year, and they try to find holes to stuff them into, and they'll keep stuffing in acorns until basically that hole fills up, till there's no longer a hole, and then they'll find a new hole or make a new hole somewhere, pecking the building. And so the genius behind this thing that Ajahn Kaspo built was it's just inside it's just empty. There's just a 5-gallon bucket, and so every now and then somebody can go up and remove the bucket, dump out the acorns, preferably somewhere away from the buildings where the woodpeckers won't find it. But so I noticed within just seconds of this first woodpecker flying away, there was 2 others that just kind of swooped in from different directions, and they dropped off their own acorns into that same hole. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But then the third woodpecker, it looked down, and I guess it realized what must have been just there was a small pile of acorns kind of sitting right at the base of it. And so it would just hop down onto the roof, grab an acorn, go back up to the hole, drop it in, look down again, grab another acorn, go back up, put it back in the hole. And I didn't have enough time to go and check this out before the puja this evening, but my guess is that bucket's probably overflowing. And so what's happening is, or the bucket's just not lined up, but maybe it's overflowing, and so the acorns are just basically falling out of the bucket and then landing at the bottom
and it seemed like there was a bit of a gap, so they're just kind of rolling back out. And I was kind of amused by just watching these woodpeckers, and it made me think of two qualities that the Ajahns talk about that are important for meditation, which is vitaka vichara, thought and examination. So in a way, these woodpeckers, they're accomplishing their task actually quite successfully. And I imagine, at least from my perspective, that every time a woodpecker drops an acorn into this hole, he probably gets a bit of like an endorphin hit, like he just succeeded. His mission accomplished. Find another acorn, put new acorn into hole. Repeat. But it seems like they have just a one-track mind. They're not able to actually see the results of what they're doing. So not only do they never, because of the system, they'll never reap actually the fruit or the acorns that they're trying to storing away. So not only that, but they don't even realize that they put in acorns and then they just immediately kind of fall right back out. So they just keep one after another. Just at least this one particular woodpecker was just going back down, grabbing an acorn, putting it back in. Observing the wildlife here is one of my hobbies and one of the things that I've come to really appreciate living here. Well, I don't know if that's a good place to leave it, but I think I'll just leave it there.
The next Dhamma talk is Anagarika Art.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhammam Sangham Namasami. So today is the Pavarana day. It's my first time being here for one. And I guess it marks the end of the Rains retreat. And I've been kind of reflecting, hearing this word Pavarana a lot this last week. First time I encountered it, I believe, was in the Anapanasati Sutta, which begins with the assembly of bhikkhus and the end of the Rains retreat, the Pavarana ceremony on the full moon. And when I first encountered this sutta, I was very joyful because it was some very nice instructions on what I should be doing, or almost like meditation instructions. Later on, I learned it was much more, a lot more to it. But in the beginning, it's very good. And so when I read the sutta, I kind of made a recording of it, and so certain parts of it have been kind of replaying in my mind today. And one of them is just kind of the imagery of that day. There's a line: "The Lord Buddha was sitting out in the open air," and I can just imagine. The Buddha sitting there, just like with this kind of expression, very serene, and he says, you've been practicing very well during this Rains retreat, and what you have not yet realized, you can realize perfectly. And I'm going to extend this Rains retreat by 1 month, because, just keep on going. And when everybody found out, there were, delighted, and all the bhikkhus in the surrounding regions started converging, and they had another month of retreat. And at the end of that month is when he gave the 16-step instruction. And I won't actually be talking about the 16-step instruction since we chanted a lot, but what's been coming up for me today is this recollection of the Buddha, this Buddha Nusati, or maybe that's right. And recently, Bhikkhu Bodhi was in this area, and he gave this wonderful retreat. I got to listen to it afterwards. But one of the themes that he introduced us to was recollection of the Buddha. And he goes through the 10 attributes that we chant every morning. And his instruction is kind of to mull them over, just kind of repeat them and see what kind of imagery they bring up. And imagery or association or whatever feeling, it's all kind of very wholesome things that it brings up. And so it starts with araham, the arahant, samma sambuddho, the perfectly enlightened one, vijja charana sampanno, he is impeccable in conduct and understanding, sugato, well gone, or the accomplished one, loka we do, the knower of the worlds, anuttaro, anuttaro is unexcelled, purisa dhamma sarati, an excelled trainer or tamer of people to be trained. Satta, teacher. Deva manusam, of gods and humans. Buddho, he is awake. Bhagawan, the Blessed One. And in the Bhikkhu Bodhi's instruction, you go through these many times, and you find a couple that work best for you. And I really like the first two, and first three, the last two. But just araham, samma sambuddho, just letting the mind take the shape of those epithets. And I got a chance to attend Ajahn Karunadhammo's day-long retreat at Spirit Rock, where he went through maybe as many as 10 themes, contemplations to settle the mind, almost like before starting a meditation. Or it can be, like maybe preliminary, or it can be, I suppose, however it might work for you. So kind of wanted to share this recollection and imagery of the Buddha that's been coming up for me today. Maybe give it a try if some of your methods are, I first encountered this from Bhikkhu Bodhi in an article he wrote where he said he's been practicing the breathing for a year or some years, and he opened the Visuddhimagga and tried it out, and then he really likes it. Maybe I'll leave it there.
Tan Dhammavaro.
tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sangham namasami. Let's relax. We can invite relaxation through our breath and through our experience of the body. And being sensitive to our process of relaxation, however that manifests for us. Let's take a moment and give ourselves to that. The first time I ever seriously meditated, I was so eager, so interested, and just, I remember my friend telling me about this 10-day retreat that we could do together, and wow, even still recalling it right now just brings up this feeling of hope that I hadn't really experienced up until that point in my life. And I remember entering the retreat with just so much earnest determination that whatever the instruction was, I was really going to do it wholeheartedly. And so when the instruction came to not react, I took it quite seriously. If there were pains in the body, not gonna buy into that. It would get to the point where I would start to gyrate, like literally gyrate, and just kind of like flail around to the point where the helpers on the course kind of had to like walk up to me slowly and kind of like tap me on the shoulder or be like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And me just kind of like looking back at them like with this cold face, like, I'm practicing here. It's really not polite to touch me when I'm really practicing seriously, so I remember many times not saying anything too, which led to confusion and them looking at the teacher, and the teacher kind of like looking back a few times like, just, leave him alone, it's okay. I forget how many years this still went on. Not all the time, because I probably would have given up meditation at that point. But, many courses I can still even remember. Just years later, these gyrating mornings, But I was quite relieved to look around the room tonight and not seeing anyone gyrating in their seats, which means that we do have the ability to tap into a relaxed state of being. And that we're here together to support each other in that. At the beginning of the retreat, I made 2 resolutions. 1, don't complain. I wanted to experiment with something that was quite direct and something I could come up with and recall relatively easily. And that was one. And the second one was seriously considering communication. And there was an opportunity for members in the community to formally study a communication process together. And as soon as I heard about it, there was a mixture of elation and trepidation at the same time. Elation that I knew that it was something that could be improved, and that by doing it together with other people, that the chances of it improving would be even greater. But also trepidation because well, I found that out later, because it actually forced me to look at how I do communicate with others, but also with myself. And so maybe we can take a moment just to recall how we communicated that idea of relaxation to ourselves. Do we tell ourselves something, or what actually happened? For myself, the more I gave attention to the quality of how I was contemplating and the quality of how I was sustaining attention, that was actually mixed with a lot of unclear messages about what my intentions were for actually sitting and meditating. Language around don'ts and shoulds were quite frequent. Don't buy into this. Don't follow that. Don't do that. Oh, I should be really diligent right now. I shouldn't be tired. Or I should be interested in this right now. And noticing the quality behind don'ts, shoulds, can'ts, anything that gives somewhat of those messages that we don't actually have the ability to decide and choose what we can do. And using that language, I noticed for myself, brought about this guilt, shame, depression, and tension, because whenever I told myself, don't do that, and then I did it, well, what's the response going to be? So maybe we can try something together. I should be mindful right now. What does that message tell us? How are we responding to that message? I have the opportunity to practice, to develop qualities that I've always wanted to develop. And now I've given myself the right conditions and the right setting to do this. So for myself, it was quite a fruitful experience. Learning that fruitful in the sense of my ability to be honest with myself, having more space to consider how to practice, and to consider that the mind is a lot more malleable than what I gave myself credit for. I wish everyone well, and I'll leave it there.
Next is Obhasi.
So happy Pavarana, everyone. I never know quite what to expect, but I've been delighting in the talks given so far. It amazes me that so many different beings of different temperaments, different strengths, different personalities, they can all give really useful and thoughtful reflections. Yeah, I find it quite inspiring that there's not one way to be a practitioner. You don't have to be an ideal meditator, knowing all the suttas, meditating in all of your free time, eating one jujube fruit a day. You can just be normal. That's okay. I've recognized the tendency in myself over my time of practice so far to really want to be something special, to want to be something exalted or different or unique. It's taken a long time, and it's still taking a lot of time, but it feels like every time I notice that tendency, it's like, well, that's some extra pain that doesn't need to be there. And so on the flip side, instead of needing to be anything, I found it to be such a relief just to come back again and again and again and again to space, to stillness. That kind of background energy that's behind all of the things. So a big part of what I've been working with recently in my practice has been seeing again and again all of these crazy voices that I'm not sure where they come from, but they come up again, and they want to go out and do something, they want to go out and make something, be something, and create something, and it's they're like little puppy dogs. They're kind of on a leash, and they really want to break free. They really want to run, and they it's also tiring. You have to hold the leash and rein them in all the time, and give them treats and make sure they're well fed, and it's just I think I'm okay without having a dog. But what I've been humbled by is how much momentum these voices can have, how persuasive they can be, how sparkly they can be. It's like if you maybe if you follow this one, you could become a perfect person. But it's been such a relief to have let go of the leash. the puppies can go this way and that, they can explore, they can do their own thing, and I don't have to hold it with tension. So being this is a spontaneous analogy, forgive me if there are holes or things don't make sense, but I've been thinking that all of these doubting voices they're running around and they're creating mischief, and the only thing I found consistently that removes the sense of unease, this sort of tension, this doubt that can arise, is going back to simplicity, to meditation, to being with. And the more and more I try to create fancy solutions, the more the rope gets entangled. It just gets more and more complicated. And I've had so much gratitude for Lungpo Pasano as a teacher, because he always guides back to simplicity, back to nurturing the roots. And again and again, it's given me faith that it doesn't have to be fancy. There can be a peace and calm in the simplicity. That being said, coming back to this kind of simple, spacious, sort of really basic feeling of just being with. It's amazing that we're able to come back to that and try to observe things clearly. And I've noticed it can be really helpful to cultivate a sense of curiosity around it, that the mind can get kind of dull if it stays there for a lengthy period of time. And so really trying to figure out what's actually going on here. What can I see? What can I learn? These are the kind of voices that I found can be really skillful to combat the sense of the drab feelings that can come with just, I'm with again, I'm being with again here, I'm with this moment again, let's keep, there's another moment, we're just going to keep being with. And and then it's like there's this spark that can be cultivated with impersonal curiosity that makes it fun. And so I've been really delighting in sort of using this open space as a playground, trying to see what I can see. Without getting pulled by all my frantic puppy dog voices too hard, trying to stay in this space. So I just wanted to loop around and again express appreciation and inspiration at the community that I'm in. I'm just kind of blown away that there are beings that are living this way and practicing this way. And their reflections uniquely attest to that. And I feel honored to be among them. I'll leave it there for this evening.
The final talk for this evening, Tan Sivako.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bodhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. There's a lot of good talks. I get to go last. Probably not my preference. Been contemplating a lot about all things converging on feeling. Feelings just have such a powerful way of hijacking our experience, and I mean, I can easily say, "Oh, feeling's not self." That's really easy to say, but yeah, just having a feeling come up, and it can be just so convincing. Like, oh yeah, this, as we hear over and over, either making much of it with metta or convincing ourselves, yeah, we need that peanut butter or something. It's just, or even for myself, just waiting to talk and being last. It's like, oh, is he going to say my name? Is he going to say, like, the heart goes a little bit. Oh, no. And yeah, it's just, we have the six senses. We can't get rid of that. They're there, so we have contact, and with that contact, we have feelings. So this is really something we live with. I think it's important to reflect on, and having wisdom with that. We do pick things up. We do have contact. We pick things up, but just being able to pick it up and set it back down again, seeing what it is. Yeah, finding the usefulness in it. Is it something to be made much of, or is this something just to know and let go? Yeah, just keep going back to that. Because we can read the books and find things that are very sensible, and oh yeah, that makes sense to me. But putting the book down, just putting the book down and closing it, and really looking at these feeling tones and that contact. Apparent here and now. Inviting one to come and see. It's interesting because wisdom is a perception, but wisdom can also be eclipsed by perception. So we can have this feeling tone and perceive it as self, and I like this, I don't like this, I need to get away from this, maybe I want more of this, and right there we've lost wisdom. We're caught in a whirlwind there. The first sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, Deva comes down and asks the Buddha, how did you cross the flood? And he says, well, I crossed the flood by not pushing forward and not standing still. And Deva kind of thinks, okay, how did you cross the flood by not pushing forward and not standing still? And the Buddha just replies, well, when I pushed forward, I got whirled about. When I stood still, I sank. And not a definitive way to look at that, but a way we can pick that up and reflect on that is that we can be there at feeling. We can watch feeling, and we can find that stillness there and the calmness. And when the water is settled and there's clarity, we can move forward and pick things up and make much of the practice, or set things down that need to be set down. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.